Liam Foster thought he was making a quick, harmless cannabis sale, but within minutes, he was staring down the barrel of a gun in a Liverpool warehouse, trapped in a deadly setup that would expose a ruthless gang and end his life in the most chilling way imaginable. In the summer of 2019, the city of Liverpool pulsed with its usual energy, a mix of old industrial grit and fresh new development. In the back streets and shadowed alleyways, small-time cannabis dealers operated quietly, confident they could avoid the police as long as they kept things low-key. Among them was 22-year-old Liam Foster, an ordinary young man in many ways who had been making side money by selling small amounts of high-grade cannabis. To those who knew him, Liam was bright, good-natured, and careful, never taking risks beyond what he thought he could handle. His deals had always been simple, usually arranged through word of mouth, and he rarely dealt with strangers. But a message changed everything. It came through a friend of a friend, a name he'd only heard once or twice, someone who called himself Jay. Jay claimed he wanted to buy several ounces of Liam's strongest cannabis and had the money to pay on the spot. For Liam, this was a tempting offer. It meant a quick profit, something that could help him cover rent and put some cash aside for the future. The only catch was Jay's chosen meeting place, an abandoned warehouse down by the docks, far from the residential neighborhoods where Liam usually worked. Jay explained that it was a safer location, away from watchful police eyes, and guaranteed nobody would interrupt them. Liam hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of meeting somewhere so isolated, but the promise of a large payment pulled at him. He convinced himself that this was just another buyer who wanted privacy. After all, the cannabis trade relied on secrecy, and plenty of customers preferred quiet, hidden spots to do their business. Still, something gnawed at him. There were rumors about violent robberies targeting cannabis dealers, gangs taking over. Liverpool's smaller drug networks, people had been disappearing or turning up badly beaten. Liam pushed those thoughts out of his head, telling himself he'd be in and out quickly. On the evening of the deal, Liam packed the cannabis carefully into small vacuum-sealed bags, stuffing them deep in his backpack. He checked his phone for messages from Jay, who kept repeating the time and place. 9 o'clock at the warehouse, alone. As the sun set over the Mersey, Liam climbed onto his battered scooter, the engine coughing to life as he rolled through the narrowing side streets of Liverpool's older districts. He could feel the summer air turning cool against his skin. A sign that night was coming fast. Reaching the warehouse district, Liam parked behind a row of rusted containers and walked the final stretch on foot. The buildings around him stood like crumbling monuments, long abandoned and scrawled over with graffiti. Broken windows gaped like hollow eyes, and the faint smell of salt water and oil drifted through the air. Liam felt his pulse quicken. This place was far from the safety of the pubs and shops he usually passed on his delivery runs. He checked his phone one last time, reading Jay's simple instructions. There was no sign of movement, no cars nearby, no voices in the empty lot. Liam wondered if he had arrived too early, or if maybe Jay had changed his mind. A heavy silence settled in, broken only by the distant thrum of ship engines in the port. Liam stood there alone, his backpack weighing on his shoulders, trying to convince himself that everything would go according to plan. But in the corners of his mind, the fear was growing, whispering that something about this deal felt deeply, dangerously wrong. Liam stood in the half-dark of the warehouse lot, shifting from foot to foot as minutes dragged by. The sense of unease crawled through him like an itch he couldn't scratch. The wind rattled loose metal siding on the old warehouse, a harsh, echoing clang that made him flinch. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that this was just a deal, nothing more. But deep down, his instincts screamed that something was out of place. He double-checked the cannabis in his backpack, making sure it was still secure, and wiped the sweat off his palms onto his jeans then. A faint sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled him from his thoughts. A dark car emerged slowly from behind one of the crumbling buildings, its headlights off, moving with deliberate silence. Liam felt a chill skitter across his shoulders. The car rolled to a stop a few yards away, and the engine cut out. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the driver's side door swung open, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a hooded jacket and kept one hand tucked inside as if holding something. In his other hand, he showed Liam a thick wad of cash, fanning the bills ever so slightly. The gesture was meant to reassure, but Liam noticed the man's tense posture and the way his eyes darted back toward the car. The back doors opened next, and two more men climbed out, their faces hidden by the shadows. Liam felt every muscle in his body tense. He considered backing away, telling them to forget the deal, but fear froze him in place. Before he could speak, the first man stepped closer, too close, and in one smooth motion drew a small handgun from inside his jacket. The sight of it made Liam's heart slam against his ribs. The man pointed it straight at him, his voice low and cold as he ordered Liam to stay still. The other two moved quickly, circling behind, cutting off any escape. The gunman waved him forward, forcing him through the warehouse's gaping doorway. Inside the place was a dark, rotting tomb, the floor littered with glass and rusted nails. Old crates and oil drums sat stacked in random piles, casting long, twisted shadows in the moonlight that seeped through holes in the roof. The smell of mold and stale water stung Liam's nose. They pushed him against a steel support beam, and one of the men grabbed his backpack, tearing it open to check the cannabis. Another searched Liam's pockets, taking his phone and wallet. Liam tried to speak, to plead, but one of them shoved him hard against the beam, telling him to shut up. The man with the gun studied the cannabis for a moment before pocketing it, then turned back to Liam with a look that made his blood run cold. There was no relief, no sign they were going to let him walk away. Instead, the men started asking for names, wanting to know who else Liam dealt with, who supplied him, where they could find more cannabis. Their questions cut through the warehouses, stale silence like knives. Liam hesitated, terrified, but refused to answer. These men weren't customers, they were predators. The realization settled heavy in his chest. The deal was never about buying weed. It was a trap, a carefully planned ambush. And now he was alone, surrounded, and completely at their mercy in the dead. Forgotten heart of Liverpool's docks, the air inside the warehouse felt like it had turned to ice. Wrapping around Liam with a suffocating chill, the men closed in, faces hard and eyes hungry for information. They wanted everything: Liam's contacts, his suppliers, his routes, his entire world. With each question, the threats grew sharper, their patience burning away. A rope from a pocket and began tying Liam's hands to the cold, rusted beam. The coarse fibers bit into his skin, cutting off circulation until his hands throbbed painfully. He tried to reason with them, but any protest was met with a heavy blow to his ribs. His head spun as their demands came again, each one crueler than the last. Still, Liam refused to give up his friends. He knew that talking meant putting more lives at risk, and the idea of betraying them felt even worse than his own fear of dying. They didn't like his silence. The beatings started with open fists, then boots. Each kick sent waves of agony through his bones, and his vision went white with pain. When Liam collapsed, half-conscious, they dragged him upright and started again. Blood dripped from his mouth, and his chest burned where their shoes had landed again and again. The smell of sweat, blood, and rotting warehouse air clogged his senses. After a while, questions stopped, replaced with insults and curses. Liam's name became meaningless to them. He was just another worthless dealer who wouldn't talk. One of the men left for a few moments, then returned with a length of iron pipe. It gleamed in the pale shaft of moonlight as he swung it once through the air, testing the weight. Liam's breath caught. A second later, the man cracked the pipe down on Liam's shin, shattering the bone with a sickening crunch that echoed across the empty concrete. The pain was indescribable, crashing over him in blinding waves. Still, he refused to break. It was almost automatic, a desperate attempt to protect his friends and family from these monsters. That tiny act of loyalty only made them angrier. One of the attackers leaned close, his voice calm and emotionless, telling Liam that no one would find him here, that no one cared, that he could scream as much as he wanted. The words cut deeper than the blows, feeding Liam's terror until he could barely think. Finally realizing they had nothing more to gain, the gang decided to end it. The gun reappeared, its black barrel reflecting the dusty moonlight. Liam's eyes widened, his breathing ragged as he struggled against the rope. The gunman stepped closer, took careful aim, and pulled the trigger. The sharp crack of the gunshot rang out in the empty warehouse, and Liam felt the impact tear through his chest. He fell silent at once, the pain fading into a numb, spreading darkness. The men didn't even check if he was dead. They tossed the iron pipe aside and left him tied to the beam, disappearing back into the night as easily as they had arrived. Outside, the wind howled through the broken glass, rattling loose debris, while inside, Liam's heartbeat stuttered and faded until there was nothing left but cold silence. For 2 long days, the warehouse stood silent, holding its grim secret. Within crumbling brick walls, outside, life in Liverpool moved on, unaware of the horror sealed inside. No one came to look for Liam. No police patrols ventured into the forgotten corners of the dockyard, and no worried friends dared to search a place so notorious for crime. The wind blew through the shattered windows, stirring dust across the concrete floor where Liam's body lay tied lifeless, still held upright by the rope, as if some cruel joke kept him standing. It was by pure chance that anyone discovered what had happened. A pair of urban explorers, searching for graffiti and photographs of Liverpool's industrial ruins, came to the warehouse in the early evening, drawn by the eerie, haunted reputation of the building. They stepped cautiously inside, flashlights cutting through the gloom, their laughter echoing until it fell silent at the sight ahead. In the flickering beam of their torch, they saw a figure slumped against a steel beam, dried blood smeared across torn clothes, face battered beyond recognition. One of them gasped and dropped his camera, the sound bouncing through the warehouse like a gunshot. The smell of death hit them next, heavy and sour. Terror rooted them in place for a moment before they stumbled backward, grabbing phones to call the police with shaking hands. When officers arrived, they stepped carefully through broken glass and rusted nails, their boots crunching across debris. The first sight of Liam's body stopped even the most hardened constables in their tracks. Crime scene lights soon turned the warehouse into a glowing pool of blue, painting the broken walls with harsh, cold color. The rope still cut into Liam's wrists, holding him in place. A final act of brutality that left no doubt about how he had died. Forensics began their work, documenting every detail. The bullet wound in his chest, the shattered leg, the bruises tracking the story of his torture. They collected fibers, took countless photographs, and sealed the scene for further examination. Liam's backpack lay discarded in a corner, ripped open and emptied, the cannabis long gone. His phone was recovered from the floor near the beam, its screen cracked but still lit with a stream of unread messages from friends. Messages that would never be answered. News of the discovery spread quickly. Officers working in the area recognized Liam's name from minor cannabis offenses, and soon his family was informed. The shock tore through them like a blade, leaving nothing but raw grief. His mother collapsed when she heard, unable to believe. Her son had died alone in such a cold and merciless place. Investigators began piecing together what little they could. It was clear the attack had been planned, that Liam was targeted not for who he was, but for what he had, and perhaps for what he might have known. The police vowed to hunt down those responsible, but the evidence was thin, and the killers had vanished. All that remained was the terrible scene, a snapshot of one young man's final moments. Left behind in a place that swallowed hope and life without a trace, detectives worked around the clock, determined not to let Liam's murder become another forgotten crime in Liverpool's underworld. They started with the small clues left behind. Tire tracks in the gravel outside the warehouse, faint footprints in the dust, and CCTV cameras positioned on a nearby industrial unit. By carefully piecing together the footage, they spotted a grainy image of the dark car pulling away the night of Liam's murder. Even though the license plate was partly obscured, a few clear frames gave police enough to start tracing its movements. Tips from local informants also began to trickle in. Fear kept most people silent, but a few voices dared to speak out, describing a group of men who had been bragging about taking over cannabis sales in the area. These men, the same ones who used Liam as an example, were trying to scare other dealers into giving up territory. It was a ruthless method of expansion, using intimidation and death as their tools. As raids spread across Liverpool, police finally caught a break. One suspect, cornered in a stolen car, tried to run, but was captured after a tense foot chase through side streets. In custody, he folded quickly, terrified of taking the fall alone. He revealed the names of his accomplices and confirmed the grim details of what happened inside the warehouse that night. The new information broke the case wide open, giving detectives enough evidence to move in on the remaining suspects. Within days, 2 more arrests followed. Officers found more stolen cannabis, Liam's ID card, and even the iron pipe used to break his leg, hidden in a garage near one suspect's flat. The killers had left behind a messy trail, their confidence blinding them to the fact police would hunt them down. The community, which had been too afraid to talk, finally felt a small sense of relief as news of the arrests spread. Liam's family attended every court hearing, refusing to look away from the truth of what had happened to him. They sat through painful testimony, learning how he had fought to protect his friends and how he had suffered in those final hours. Each detail cut deeper than the last, but they wanted justice to be seen and heard, not hidden behind closed doors. The gang members showed little remorse, their faces blank and hardened as the verdicts came down. They would spend decades behind bars, locked away from the streets they once tried to rule with fear. In the months after, flowers and candles began appearing at the warehouse where Liam's life ended, left by friends and strangers alike. Graffiti. Artists painted a mural of his name on the warehouse wall, a quiet act of defiance against the violence that had claimed him. People came to stand by it, taking a moment to remember a young man who trusted the wrong buyer on the wrong night, paying the ultimate price for what seemed like a simple deal. Liam's story became a stark warning in Liverpool's cannabis trade, reminding everyone that even the smallest transaction could become a doorway to unthinkable brutality. His memory, carved into that forgotten warehouse and into the city's heart, would not be erased.